Low-key geek.
Hey,
He's a low-key geek. He tries to be out there when he wants to be, but hey, he's a low-key geek.
Oh, what's going on, guys? Happy Monday! It's Renee, Low-Key Geek, back live once again on this lovely Monday, July 27th. Can you believe it's July 27th? Yeah, July is almost over. And I've said this before, we're halfway through the month now. Not the month, the year. And quite a year it's been, but I hope you guys had a wonderful weekend. I hope your weeks have started off, as well as it can, given it that it's Monday and all that, and I hope all of you don't have the case of the Mondays and everything. But, welcome to the Low-Key Geek Live podcast. This is the podcast where, I talk about the latest in pop culture news, things that may have dropped towards the tail end of last week, over the weekend. Mondays are notorious for news dropping throughout the day, so go over that. Plus, I like to go over some of the weekend charts, see what you guys have been watching over the weekends. Drive-ins are in full effect, but there haven't been any new movie releases as of yet. We'll dive into a little bit of that in this show, but we'll review kind of what you guys were watching on iTunes and Netflix. So, as for myself, my weekend was pretty, normal but busy. I don't know if you guys had a chance to check out my video I did last week. I believe it was last week or early last week, but Japan Cuts, the yearly annual Japanese movie festival, is in full effect online this time. Normally around this time I would be attending it live at Japan Society here in New York, but because of the pandemic and all that, it's they moved everything online, which is great because it allows more people to have a chance to watch it from their homes and from outside of New York, which is great exposure for Japanese film and people who love Japanese cinema. So I've been kind of slowly watching the movies I had on my list, but I will be continuing to do that again this week because the festival runs until Thursday. But if you buy your ticket online for any showing, I believe you have until Friday to watch it. So keep that in mind. Had another great D&D session with my boys, and that's always a lot of fun there. Kind of a rough go, I think. We made a lot of mistakes, but we're learning, but it's always a lot of fun. I watched a couple of documentaries, which I will go into in a little bit, but also playing a lot of games. So, I had some fun with some Paper Mario. I streamed Valorant for the first time yesterday, and had a little bit of streaming issues because I never streamed on my PC, gaming wise yet. So have to iron out some things. I had to go ahead and purchase a LAN cable because I think the Wi-Fi is just not kicking it. It's not doing its job. But yeah, played some Worms. I went back and played Worms WMD with a friend of mine. So yeah, if at any time you want to watch me make a fool of myself, or you're interested in joining me in my gameplay, I do stream on Twitch Mondays, Fridays, and Sundays. So definitely check me out there, or you can follow my social for my schedule. But if you're also new to the channel here on YouTube and you're new to watching the show, I stream every Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. A little bit of a late start today because I had some technical things to iron out, and that's also why I wasn't able to have a podcast last week because of the same tech issues. But looks like everything's working as they should. Everything's working fine. But yeah, if you like what you see, hit that like and subscribe button, especially the like button, because I think a lot of people don't realize that, the more likes I get, or, if you want to dislike things, I encourage that as well. But it does help with the YouTube algorithms, and helps me, get out there, and hopefully more people can catch the show and join this community that I've been trying to build up here. So, so without further ado, let us dive into what you guys were watching over the weekend. So, certain things dropped and certain things, were kind of stayed the same. I think we had more releases the weekend prior, but let's go into what we see first on iTunes here. So the number one on iTunes as far as video on demand is a new Dave Franco directed horror movie, The Rental. So I didn't watch this, but I did read up on it because Dave Franco came up in the news last week. Apparently he's in talks to play Vanilla Ice in some sort of movie. So I think that's going to be really interesting there. But he directed this horror movie that stars Alison Brie and Dan Stevens, and basically it's a movie about, a weekend getaway, people renting a house for the weekend, and then some shenanigans happen with the owners of the rental and all that. So it's been getting pretty decent reviews, so I may or may not check it out. Again, horror is not always my thing, so it might take me some time to check this out. But yeah, you guys, horror movies will always be on top of the list, especially when it comes to streaming, and especially now that we have the drive-in. We're in full-blown drive-in season, so that stuff is going to be high on the list every week. So it shows again here with The Rental. Number 2, we have The Outpost. This is the war drama starring Legolas himself. Why can't I remember his name right now? That's so weird. Orlando Bloom. Sorry. Yes, Orlando Bloom. Also Clint Eastwood's son. This has been in the top list here for the last couple of weeks. So it still stays high up there. A lot of you guys are still watching it. So good stuff there. Number 3, you have Trolls World Tour. This is the only, I guess, family-friendly movie that's on the video on demand list here on iTunes, but it's been on the top 10 for as long as I can remember now. But yeah, this holds strong at number 3. It tends to go up and down, but it is high there. Number 3. Number 4, The Invisible Man, Elizabeth Moss's horror film here. Horror suspense film, I guess, in the Universal Monsterverse, I guess, so to speak. But it's a Blumhouse classic. This has been really high up on the list every week. I think maybe there was 1 or 2 weeks where it kind of dropped off of the top 10, but this was one of the last movies that made it out in cinemas and have been, a lot of people constantly watch this movie or watching it for the first time. So this creeps way back up in the top 5 again over the weekend. So number 5, you have Bad Boys for Life. This was the third movie in the Bad Boys trilogy there with Martin Lawrence and Will Smith. So this comes back on the top 10 after being out for several weeks. So this comes in at number 5. Number 6, you have The High Note. This is the first time I saw it back in the top 10 after its debut several weeks ago. So basically this is, I don't know if you would call it coming of age, but it follows this aspiring singer from her early days to her rise in stardom. So this comes in at number 6 there. Number 7 is another new movie, A Nice Girl Like You. Basically, the synopsis here is, after being accused of being too inhibited by her ex-boyfriend, a violinist creates a rather wild to-do list that sends her on a whirlwind journey of self-discovery. It sounds like a lot of shenanigans that involves sex, drugs, and maybe some rock and roll. I don't know. But this comes in at number 7 here. It's touted as a comedy, like a rom-comish comedy. So if you're into that, this could be something for you. Number 8 is the 80s classic. I think it's the 80s, or is it the 90s? Let me look this up. Rad. Yeah, 86 it came out, but Rad. The reason why this is up here on the list is because, it was recently released in 4K. So I think a lot of people wanted to see it. It hasn't really been out there as far as digital release or physical copy. So, it's your typical 80s classic movie that centers around this really aggressive BMX biker and the stuff that he gets himself into and all that. So, classic movie. If you're into 80s, this could be something for you to catch up on, and I highly recommend it. Number 9 is The Gentleman. This is the latest in Guy Ritchie. From Guy Ritchie. So this is another movie that comes in and out of the top 10 for the last 3 months. So definitely catch it if you haven't seen it yet. I have not seen it yet, so this is definitely on my list of things to watch sometime soon, hopefully. And number 10 to close out the list here, we have Archive. This is kind of the sci-fi thriller that stars Theo James. Basically, the movie is about a husband who loses his wife, but was able to save her memories in this kind of digital archive. And now he is trying to recreate her in robotic form with her memories, and how certain entities are trying to put a stop to him there. So that is your top 10 in video on demand. So let's go over to see what you guys were watching on Netflix over the weekend. So number 1, The Kissing Booth 2. So this is kind of a teen rom-com. Never heard of even the original, but apparently when this came out, it was, very highly popular, and a lot of you, I guess a lot of the teens at the households now that, people are still staying home, have been watching this. And then as you could see later in the list, at number 7, the original Kissing Booth came out to be within the top 10 here. So I guess people who weren't aware of it, like myself, decided to go back first and watch the original, then watch the second, or vice versa. I don't know, some people do that. So that is very highly here on the top 10. Number 2, Fear City, New York versus the Mafia. This is the new docuseries that really goes deep into how the FBI battled the mobs here in New York City. So I did watch this over the weekend. I'll give my thoughts on it in a little bit. Number 3, you have another docuseries here, The Last Dance. It debuted on Netflix in the US last weekend. So it still finds itself at number 3 for those who didn't catch it when it was on ESPN several months ago. Number 4, you have Cursed. This is the new series on Netflix that kind of puts a spin on the King Arthur storylines, but puts a lot of heavy focus on the Lady in the Lake. So interesting series. I've been meaning to catch this whenever I have a moment, so hopefully I can do a review on it soon. Number 5, you have the classic Showtime series Shameless. I believe the recent season, or there has been news about the upcoming season, have been making the news last week. So I think a lot of people kind of went back on Netflix to catch the previous seasons. Or I think this is the first time that we have... No, not really. No, that's not true. Netflix has been streaming Shameless for some time now, but it looks like you guys have been catching up on the series there. So that comes in at number 5. Number 6, you have this animated movie, Animal Crackers. This movie, I believe, came out a couple of years ago. I think it was done in 2018. But basically, the synopsis of this is a family must use a magical box of animal crackers to save a rundown circus from being taken over by their evil uncle. The voice cast here is actually pretty high up there. So you have the lovely celebrity couple here, John Krasinski and Emily Blunt. You have Danny DeVito, Sir Ian McKellen, and Sylvester Stallone, just to name a few. So a nice offering for family films and for the kids in your family. So this is right there on the top of the list. As I mentioned before, number 7 is the original Kissing Booth. Number 8 is the Charlize Theron action movie, The Old Guard. It's been getting a lot of mixed reviews. Some people tout it as some of the one of the best action movies on Netflix and possibly of the year, and others are saying it's pretty dull and lackluster. So hopefully, if I can clear through my Japanese movie queue this week, I can finally make some time to watch this movie so that I can see what the fuss is all about. Number 9 is another kind of docuseries here, Down to Earth with Zac Efron. This has been on the top 10 list, I think, for the last 3 weeks now. Basically, Zac Efron travels around the world with like kind of this guru, and they talk about and uncover sustainable forms of living and how other societies or communities kind of live and survive with very little means. So very interesting stuff. Could be timely, especially with what we're suffering and going through now. People are trying to do what they can to live a little bit more freer, a little bit less constraining, and using kind of the resources they have available to them. So, a lot of people are watching this. I am very curious to catch this, so hopefully I can catch it sometime soon. And then to round out the top 10 here, you have the last, at least what they're calling the last of the Ip Man saga, Ip Man 4. That stars Donnie Yen here. The series of movies are supposed to kind of, I guess, tell the story of the life of the teacher who taught Bruce Lee and kind of the things that he went through in his own life. And I'm sure it's glorified to an extent. So, but it has been a very popular series for some time now. So number 4 makes up the top 10 on Netflix. So, like always, if there's anything here on the list that you watched and you caught, share your thoughts and let me know what you think of them in the comments. Or, I talk about a lot of different subjects when I'm on Twitch too, so definitely join me there and we can have a conversation about anything. But as for myself, like I mentioned, I did watch Fear City. And I did watch another documentary too, which I'll go into in a little bit. But my thoughts on Fear City, it was surprisingly short. I think it was only 4 episodes, so I was able to really breeze through it. But growing up in New York, especially in the 80s, New York was a very different scene back then. Crime was very high up on the list. There were a lot of areas within New York that you were not supposed to really travel into and kind of walk around, especially when you have high drug usage, drug dealing, you have high prostitution and all that stuff. And, the talks about mafia and knowing like which neighborhoods the mafia runs or the mafia lives has always been in the lexicon of New Yorkers, especially those of us who grew up during that time. So when when it started making the news and all that there is a new fight against the mafia and to bring the mafia down, it was always very intriguing, especially as I got older, to kind of try to understand more about how that all came about, or just how the mafia really operated here in New York. And there have been movies that have been made to kind of try to tell a story about it and go into the intricacies of all the different mafia families and all that. But this documentary really goes deep into all the different families and how they operated, what they controlled, which, of course, I knew they controlled certain things, but I had no idea how much they really controlled here in New York, especially the construction and all that. And, I'm sure a lot of people who watch The Sopranos, like myself, are like, oh yeah, this is nothing really new and all that. But still, The Sopranos is probably based a little bit on reality. But when you really look at true events and how the mafia really operated and ran New York, it's so intriguing, very interesting, and how the FBI kind of took it upon themselves to infiltrate that world, understand that world more in order to kind of, move in and take them down. The one thing I did find really interesting here is that they put a lot of emphasis on Rudy Giuliani. And yeah, it's been known for many years, and even when Giuliani became mayor of New York, which I think he did a really great job. Unfortunately, I can't speak much about him now with his shenanigans lately in this day and age. But, he was at the forefront of leading the charge on taking the mafia down. It was him and I believe 3 other state prosecutors that, were working on the case to, take the mafia down, especially the mafia bosses. It was them and him, including, that kind of came up with the strategy on how to, use the laws that are currently there and existing to kind of work on infiltrating and arresting certain members of the mafia to really truly affect each of the families altogether. So the docuseries really goes through, how the FBI kind of tapped and wired all the different families, how they had to go through and really put the pieces together and really prove that each of these families, not only were they involved in a different thing, but how all the families were working as a whole unit. So very interesting stuff. I did wish that it went more into detail. I felt like there were a lot of things that were kind of glanced over, but for what they offered, I mean, it's for anyone who never grew up in New York, for anyone who's interested in like mafia or mobsters or true crime stuff. There's a lot of you out there. This is definitely a good series to watch because it does give you a little bit more clarity on how things were here in New York City, especially with the inner workings of some of the top headlines, like some of the big hits on like family members and how much of the construction business did the mafia run and what were some of the details, because they did play a lot of the wiretaps that they were able to listen in on different mafia members talking about their business and the families and all that. I guess a part of me was hoping that they would release more of that audio, because for me, out of the whole series, that was the stuff that was the most intriguing, was listening in on a lot of these key mafia members talking about the business, talking about putting hits on people and controlling all the different types of businesses here in New York. So very interesting stuff. So I really thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think it's worth a watch there. You definitely won't, and like I said, you won't waste time, and it definitely moves really quickly. Like I said, it's only 4 episodes, I believe, 4 or 5, and they're like an hour long each. So definitely worth the watch. And again, if you're into the subject matter, or if you grew up in New York and you kind of just want to relive and understand more about all that stuff that happened in the 70s and 80s, definitely an interesting thing to catch there. So that is Fear City. The other docuseries that I watch, and again, it's, I do get intrigued with a lot of the news, especially when it comes to some of the controversies and some of the crazy stuff that's happening out there, especially with all the different movements. So, Jeffrey Epstein has always been an interesting topic, and, unfortunate stuff that he was involved in, and crazy stuff that he did and was accused of and was proven to be, kind of the mastermind behind a lot of the unfortunate stuff that he was into. I was always curious, I guess, to learn more about that stuff. And, I took some time for myself to really make sure that I was in the proper headspace to really watch this stuff. And with the recent arrest of his, ex-girlfriend, who was apparently his right-hand man, especially when it came to a lot of the stuff that he did, it kind of brought it back to the forefront for me, and I was really, really interested to learn more. So I finally watched Jeffrey Epstein, Filthy Rich on Netflix, and here are my thoughts right now. Am I glad I watched it? 100%. It's great to know and learn more about Jeffrey Epstein. You know, I think he was always shrouded in mystery. Like, we don't know how he made his money. We don't know where he came from. We don't know how he kind of progressed into society to be this like huge, you know, financier and all that stuff like that. And the amount of money that he was responsible for and businesses that he worked with and people that he was involved with and all that. So very interesting stuff to learn there. Is this something that I could, you know, learn more about and want to learn more about the stuff that he was involved in detail? No, I really don't want to. I feel like I've learned enough. It was interesting to hear all the stories from all the victims, you know, and again, you know, spoiler alert, if you don't know anything about Jeffrey Epstein, he was a pedophile, and, you know, he paid young girls for sexual acts, you know, and when it was all revealed in the news, it was just mind-blowing. And, you know, the docuseries really goes into detail as to how he did his business and how he kind of coerced these young girls to do what he wanted. And again, the really, I guess, mind-blowing and disgusting thing about it too was how much of, you know, his ex-girlfriend was involved in it, how she was an active recruiter and how she participated, you know. And again, this is all according to the accounts of the victims who were featured in the docuseries. And then how he kind of trafficked these girls and kind of, you know, lent favors to other people in society, in that society, to go through with their, you know, criminal activities and perversions. So again, it's good to watch this and understand like how it really shows you how a man of power can get away with so much, and how much, you know, money and influence and how far that really goes here in the country and in the world. Of course, we always had inklings on and indications of how much that is true. But again, seeing how this whole thing really like panned out, who was involved, who knew, how, you know, where it happened. I mean, it was just amazing. And I'm not saying amazing as like I'm trying to glorify it, but just it was just amazing that something like this could be happening for so long. I believe the time span was like from the late 70s all the way up until like the early 2000s. The countless amounts of victims involved and who got tricked into doing these things or trapped into doing these things, it's like in the hundreds, and it's really, really baffling. And again, it's a part of history that is good to know. And if we are to learn anything from it, it allows us to have that conversation and communicate with others to warn them that these things can happen, warn them on kind of, you know, watch out for these type of activities, or watch out for these type of people, or watch out, you know, when you hear certain things or when you're approached in certain ways. But it's just unfortunate that it had to happen like that, and that, you know, all these people were involved in it, and, you know, the crazy stuff that, you know, he was involved in and those around him. I mean, it is very, very fascinating. And, you know, I am a fan of like the true crime stuff. You know, I've been touting the praises of Unsolved Mysteries, and I'm really happy that show is now on Netflix and they're doing new episodes. So I'm looking forward to that stuff. But and Netflix does a really great job with their documentaries. I mean, they really, really put forth a lot of facts and a lot of accounts from all sides, really, as much as possible. But and I am glad that they put that docuseries together, because again, it makes me learn more about what I've been reading in the headlines, and understanding more about those involved. And putting into light the victims that were involved too, and having their voices heard, because I think the most tragic part about this whole scenario is that they were unheard of. Like, their voices were unheard for so long, and they were denied chances to talk about it, because of the corrupt justice system in Florida, the prosecutors there, and how they kind of the fact that they were able to strike a deal with Epstein so that he could only spend 18 months in jail, but deny him having a trial and allowing for the victims to speak up in court was just mind-blowing. And they do go deep into a lot of that stuff there, but no need to really further talk about it. But again, if this is something that you're interested in, look, I can't recommend this docuseries to everybody. There's a lot of subject matter in there that's very sensitive and kind of disgusting, to be honest with you, especially since some of the accounts are very detailed. But this happens in this world. This is something that happens around, and not just only here. It happens worldwide, and sometimes we just never hear about it, or we turn a blind eye on it, or we choose not to pay attention. But I think we should pay attention to this stuff so that we can kind of work together as a society to make sure that these things don't happen anymore, and that if we hear about certain people who may be involved in this, we act on it right away. No matter how much power they have, I feel like people need to speak up and talk about these things. So, if you feel like you could stomach it, I definitely recommend you watch it. It's heavy subject matter. But again, it gives you that knowledge and understanding of all the stuff that was involved with that whole scenario and situations there. So both docuseries worth watching. Definitely check it out. But yeah, those were, I guess, my 2 cents to kind of phrase my review section. So that's about it. So moving on, some big news dropped today. And again, I feel like I'm talking about Tenet a lot. Tenet, the Chris Nolan movie that was supposed to come out several months ago and constantly in the headlines for being pushed back because of pandemics, or the pandemic, and movie theaters not being fully opened yet, and this and that, and he refuses to put this stuff on video on demand. So let's recap, because I feel like this all kind of came out last week, leading up until the news today. So first off, the cinemas in China had to close down because they were seeing increases in corona cases there. So they're trying to figure out how they're going to reopen things. And what they are implementing, or what they're planning to implement, is that they're putting a movie time limit on any showings that show in Chinese cinemas. And that current time limit now is 2 hours. So they're saying any movie that they show in theaters in China must adhere to the 2-hour time limit. Nothing more, right? Now, if you're familiar with Christopher Nolan and his movies always surpass 2 hours, right? So this automatically denies Tenet from showing in Chinese cinemas. And if you've been following the movie industry for the last several years, the China box office plays really heavily on the overall revenue for movies that release, especially blockbuster movies. So this is going to be a huge blow to Warner Brothers and Christopher Nolan. So because of that, Christopher Nolan, or maybe not so much him, but Warner Brothers said, you know what? We need to really rethink our strategy. So they removed Tenet from their release schedule and pushed it back indefinitely with a date to be determined. Because of that, all the major theater chains have delayed their reopenings again, because they're really, really highly depending on Tenet, on to be that one movie that brings everyone back to cinemas. So they're having a lot of headache and frustration and stress. They put out statements to all the major studios and say, you must adhere to your release schedule and your release dates. We beg you, blah, 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 this and that. So after that, Tenet and the people at Warner Brothers, they said, maybe what we'll do is that we'll do a slow release rollout. we'll look at the world situation, which cinemas are open in which countries. Maybe we could release it there first. And then in the US, whichever states are not suffering, drastically from Corona and their movie theaters are open, okay, maybe we could release it in those states and then do like a slow rollout as the year goes, right? So that was the rumor. So today, Warner Brothers finally announced their full rollout plan. That includes rollout overseas and domestically. All right. So what they're saying now is that the film will launch in over 70 countries worldwide starting Wednesday, August 26th. It will also open in Canada on August 27th, and then in the US in select cities on Wednesday, September 2nd. So the planned release dates and the countries involved are as follows. Wednesday, August 26th, you have countries like Belgium, Bulgaria, Croatia, Denmark, Egypt, Finland, France, Holland, Iceland, Indonesia, Italy, Korea, Lithuania, Latvia, Portugal, Serbia. The list goes on, right? Sweden, Switzerland, and the UK. All right. Thursday, August 27th, you have Australia, Austria, as I mentioned before, Canada, Germany, Hong Kong, Malaysia, New Zealand, Singapore, Taiwan, Thailand, and the UAE. All right. That's just I'm kind of simplifying it here. On that next day, Friday, August 28th, you have East Africa, Nigeria, Romania, Norway, Spain, Vietnam. Wednesday, the following week, September 2nd, US, certain cities, as they said, where they could release stuff and all that. After that, Thursday, September 3rd, Kuwait and Qatar. Then the following week, Thursday, September 10th, you have Kazakhstan, Russia. And then Friday, September 18th, then the week after, you have Japan. So this is their overall release schedule right now. This is the plan that they're going with. And it looks like the majority of people outside of the US will be able to watch Tenet sooner than most of us here in the US do. Again, they're very adamant. We're not releasing anything video on demand. This movie will see theatrical release first, and then a decision will be made about video on demand. So what does this mean? Several things. So as a moviegoer, as a movie fan, as I guess a cinephile in a way, this concerns me. The only reason why this concerns me is because, as we all know, Christopher Nolan movies always have a lot of secrets in them. When you look at the trailers, you could see like, oh, it's a movie that kind of plays on time in a unique way. Maybe there's a sense of multi-dimensions in there. He loves talking about science and physics in his movies and does a really good job about that stuff. So with all these countries that get to watch the movie first, and with the state of streaming and online and social media, these secrets are going to be released. No matter how hard people try to avoid them, no matter how hard people try to not say anything, there will be people who will spoil this movie for everyone, for the majority. That will ruin the movie-going experience once people who haven't seen the movie have a chance to finally see it. So that's already my issue there. Number 2, bootlegging. Now, again, with the state that we're in now of streaming, digital, media and capabilities, social media, all that stuff, this movie will be bootlegged very easily and can release in the black market, or however you want to say, the dark web out there. And with every Christopher Nolan movie, you have tons and tons of people who work on these productions. This is money that's taken away from them when the movie finally gets released in cinemas, right? So, sure, I had my moment back when I was younger, when I used to bootleg stuff and download things. But as I grew older, as I started, becoming friends with people who work in the industry, once I started to get a full understanding of how this really affects them and Hollywood in general, Hollywood doesn't need more money. I understand that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not an idiot. I'm talking about the people who are not your directors, producers, studios. I'm talking about these people who are your construction workers, your carpenters, your makeup artists, your hairstylists, your costume designers, all the people that you see at the credits at the end, after the cast, after who produced things, after who directed things, everyone else involved. That's like sometimes could be endless. These people rely on movie theaters playing their movies for their livelihood, and bootlegging unfortunately takes that away. So it's a very interesting, and you could see it's a well thought out plan, but those are my main concerns there. And I've done a really good job at avoiding spoilers and all that stuff like that, but you never know, like something could like pop up on social media all of a sudden, and then bam, Tenet is really this, or I know there's been a lot of rumor and debate on, is Tenet part of the Inception universe or whatever. I don't need to know anything about that stuff. So I give it to Warner Brothers to trying to see what they can do to maximize their revenue potential for this movie. But I really wish they could just reconsider and do something that is very simple. Release it video on demand, and you could release it in the theaters at the same time, And then when the state of the world is in a better spot, do a re-release, because Christopher Nolan's his movies are meant to be watched in movie theaters because of the cinematics, because of the effects, because of the gravitas of his films and his stories. I would watch it on demand at home, and then the minute I could find out that I can watch it in a theater, I'm going to do it, because it deserves to be seen in the movie theater. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there who probably won't do that. Or you have drive-ins. Why not release these things at the drive-ins? Release this movie in the drive-ins. I know the revenue potential is not as big as you would have wanted, but still, it is revenue that you're going to earn. And it allows more people to have a chance to watch your movie now at the same time like the rest of the world. So I don't know. Those are just my initial thoughts there. It's very, very interesting scenario. But again, because of all these things happening, because of the decision from the China cinemas, we had, and this is going to be an ongoing discussion we're going to have for the next couple months, more delays and more pushbacks. So, for example, Wonder Woman 1984 is being pushed back now to October. You have Quiet Place 2 that's being moved back all the way to April of 2021, and that's really unfortunate because that was one of the movies I was looking forward to this year. Mulan. So, the three major blockbuster movies that cinemas and moviegoers were really looking forward to this summer, especially now with the pandemic, and these were the holdouts. These were the ones that, these are our release dates, we're sticking to them. We may have to push back a week or two, but these are the main movies. You had Wonder Woman, Tenet, and Mulan. Mulan now has been pushed back indefinitely. It's been removed from Disney's release schedule, and they're trying to figure things out. Will it release on Disney Plus? Don't know. Would we like to see it on Disney Plus? Of course we would. But what will that mean as far as revenue for Disney? Don't know. So, TBD. Wes Anderson's latest movie pulled from the release schedule. And, for me personally, Wes Anderson movies are like an event. I always look forward to his latest. I'm a huge fan of Wes Anderson. He's probably, right now, currently top 5 directors for me. So, his movie is being pushed back with no date yet in sight. TBD. However, last week we did get great news. Great news about Bill and Ted 3. Bill and Ted 3, Bill and Ted Face the Music, will be released on video on demand and theaters simultaneously September 1st. And that news made me very happy. And again, Bill and Ted 3 is one of those movies that, it's kind of hard to say if it would made huge bucks in the cinemas and all that. I'm sure it would have done decently, especially since they would have ended up being one of the only movies to come out recently and all that. But to have it available on demand, I think is brilliant, and it's probably one of those movies that's probably meant for that. Not to take anything away from Keanu and Alex Winters, but Bill and Ted is an older property, and I feel like the younger generation maybe are not as invested as maybe some of us older folks who grew up watching these movies. But this makes me extremely happy. They have a pretty great strategy there. We'll see how it pans out, of course. But yeah, very, very good stuff there. Also last week, it was Con Week. So you had, your San Diego Comic-Con online. You had, certain other major companies and publishers doing their own con and everything like that. So obviously they had a lot of panels, or online Zoom panels, as I call it. Bill and Ted 3 was one of them. It was great to see everyone involved in the movie kind of talk about it and all that. Keanu is like super hyped and really excited for the movie. But during one of those panels was the New Mutants panel. So, New Mutants, again, it's one of those funny stories where, the movie has been done for years now, and it just never can find a release. It's always being pushed back. It was under Fox, and then when Disney bought Fox, then it was, doubtful it would come out. Then they said, no, it's coming out, and then it got pushed back. And then we don't know about it. The cast has no clue if this will ever see the light of day, but it was nice that they had a panel with the cast there, the director, I believe the director is Josh Boone, or Jeff Boone, one of those, I forget. But, they talked about the movie, and interesting enough, they are sticking still to their August 28th release date. I don't know if that's going to be true. I mean, there are a lot of rumors saying that, at this panel, they're going to finally announce that it's going to be coming out on Disney Plus or Video On Demand or whatever. But no, right now they're holding strong and true to August 28th. August 28th is going to be coming out in theaters. They even mentioned that, they already started working on or already finished a lot of the Blu-ray extras, a lot of deleted scenes and commentary and all that stuff like that. So that's really interesting and fun to hear. They revealed the runtime, which is 98 minutes, not that long of a movie at all. They said originally it was like over 100, but then they, cut some things back. But all those things that they cut, you'll be able to see on the Blu-ray, extras and all that stuff like that. They also released the opening scene last week, and it looked interesting to me. Honestly, it did. It looked really, really fascinating. And I know it's not much. It was like, I don't know, 8 minutes or what have you. But it looked really interesting to me. So, yeah, New Mutants looks like, and we'll see what happens come August. And we'll see if that changes there. But yeah, just to run down some other interesting panels that happened from last week. They had a Constantine reunion. So Keanu was very busy with Bill and Ted and Constantine, and it was just really interesting to hear the people involved talk about their time with Constantine. Constantine for me is a very underrated movie. I love that movie. You had Tilda Swinton there. You had a very, very young Shia LaBeouf. And Keanu was just being Keanu, and for me, even though it's not an exact carbon copy of what the character of Constantine should be like from the comics, it worked for me. And I feel like this is another role that's fit perfectly for Keanu. And it was interesting to hear about their sequel plans. They had like 2 sequels in mind, very dark and very way out there, and they were all planned to make them R-rated and everything. So, will there ever be a time where we could see another Constantine live action movie with Keanu involved? I hope so. I would be definitely looking forward to that. But with all the properties being owned by different people now, and just how things are working, it's kind of hard to say. So I do hope Warner Brothers gives this property another chance, and I hope they could bring back the same team to work on it. So yeah, if all of these panels, and by the way, are available on YouTube, so you could easily find them. I highly recommend that you catch catch them if you're interested in learning more about all that stuff. So, moving on to other news here, something that I read about Sonic the Hedgehog 2 has been confirmed, and it will be finally released spring of 2022. So for you Sonic fans out there and fans of the movie, you do have a little wait, but it's nice to know that they're very solid with a date, and that only means that they're probably going to be starting to work on it if they haven't already. I was very, very pleased with the first Sonic movie. I was very surprisingly pleased with how well that came out. So definitely looking forward to that. So that kind of rounds out the kind of like the movie and Hollywood news there. But for gaming, I cover a lot of gaming topics with Paul from Paul Programs during our Nerds to Man podcast. So for anything gaming related, I do highly recommend that you catch us on Wednesdays at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Twitch, to hear about the latest in gaming news. But certain things came up that I was really interested to talk about. So Ghost of Tsushima was a very big release that happened 2 weeks ago. I played it for a little bit, and I'm loving what I've seen so far, and a lot of people are really playing it and loving this game. Every day you hear new reactions and news about the game. As a matter of fact, I'll be playing it again tonight, my part 2 of the playthrough on Twitch, so check it out if you're around. But the numbers have been released by Sony, and apparently Ghost of Tsushima sold 2.4 million copies globally in the first 3 days of its release, and that is phenomenal and an astronomical number. So according to Sony, it broke the record for a first-party IP debut. So good for Sony and good for Sucker Punch there. It's a great game. And again, I'm still early on into it, but I'm loving everything that I'm seeing so far and that I'm experiencing so far. So if you have a chance, do check it out, or you could watch people like me play it before you make your own decision. But yeah, so that's really interesting to hear. Surprising news during Con Week last week. G4, the infamous cable channel that was dedicated to tech, gaming, and everything in the nerd culture, is apparently making a comeback. They made an announcement through a video tease about G4 coming back, and then their Twitter account reopened and saying that they never left, they're still playing games, and they have plans to relaunch something in 2021, so in next year. Whether it's going to be like an online thing, maybe a podcast, maybe a website, video series, YouTube channel, Twitch channel, I don't know, but I find this very fascinating. I'm wondering who's still going to be involved in it too, because I know I guess for at least for me, like the main figureheads there was Adam Sessler, right? So he was a major person there, and I believe her name is escaping me, Morgan. Let me just quickly look this up, because it's gonna kill me if I don't come up with this. Morgan Webb. Yeah, Morgan Webb. They were like the main faces of G4 for a very long time. And I remember when it was Tech TV to start off with, and Paul and myself, we talked about it in our show last week. But it's very, very interesting to hear that they're making a comeback here. Will Attack of the Show come back? Will Olivia Munn be involved in it in any way? I guess we'll see. One of the highlights of my life and my career, and I've spoken about this before, was when I worked in the game industry, and one of the games that I worked on was finally reviewed on G4, and not reviewed very well. And the amount of jokes they made about the game made me so happy, because it was the same crap that we were thinking about when we were finishing the game. And one day I'll go into the story and history of all that. But yeah, I'm excited to see what they're going to come up with. And it's just nice to have another outlet for gaming nerds like myself, and people who are into pop culture like myself. So we'll see what happens. Last week, also, the Xbox Game Showcase came and went. Mixed reviews. I didn't really give my thoughts last week because it came out after our Nerds to Men podcast. But here are my quick thoughts here. A little underwhelming. I'll say I've not been a fan of Halo for many years now. I felt like it was getting very repetitive. I am no longer invested in the storyline like I used to. It's kind of similar to like how my love for Destiny, came and went, because it just felt repetitive after a while, and it's just not into it as I used to be. So when they showed Infinite, surprisingly enough, it looks the same to me. It looks like more of the same. It's nice to know that the world looks a little bit more expansive there, but it just looks more of the same. I don't see any innovation in there. Maybe I'm missing it. I don't know. But it sounds like there's a good amount of you out there who feel the same way. So that's there. There were several things that looked really interesting. Crossfire. They showed gameplay footage there. The campaign for that looks really interesting and intriguing, and I feel like that's something that I'm definitely going to be maybe checking out and looking into. Also, Rare debuted one of their titles. Now, it was just in trailer form, so we didn't actually see kind of actual gameplay. But Everwild is a Rare game that they're working on, and it looks very gorgeous. It looks extremely pretty. It involves nature and animals, and it looks like it's a group of people who are kind of ensuring that nature and the animals coexist really well, and that they fend off of whatever that is hurting that. So it looks really interesting. Of course I want to see more, and I want to see more gameplay there, because it's hard to just judge things on just a trailer, like I've been saying for so long. So yeah, I'm definitely interested to see more of that. And I guess the other really huge highlight was that they teased Fable. Finally, Fable looks like we're getting another Fable, which it took them long enough to kind of work on. But yeah, Fable, we're finally getting Fable. Again, it was just a teaser trailer, all cinematics. So we don't know anything about it yet. One other thing, Psychonauts 2. It's nice to see Psychonauts coming back. Tim Schafer, you all know, I hope by now, how much of a fan of Tim Schafer I am. And I'm a huge fan of all of his games. So it was teased. We saw gameplay footage, and it looks fantastic. And it's nice to see. We were surprised to find out that Jack Black and Tim Schafer are teaming up again. And I don't think Jack Black will actually be a character in the game, but he lent his voice for the soundtrack. So it looks like we have original Jack Black music that is going to be heard throughout our gameplay of Psychonauts 2. So you see really interesting stuff, here and there, but it's very difficult to compare my overall feeling of their showcase compared to what Sony did with their PS5 showcase. In a way, it's night and day. And it's just so unfortunate. But yeah, I think I give it a 7 out of 10. It was okay. But maybe we'll get more into it in the Nerds to Men podcast this week. So do check it out if you are around. But yeah, those are just my initial thoughts there. Also, we're celebrating a lot of significant anniversaries. Today especially. But last week, and maybe 2 weeks ago, it started off with 20th anniversary of Bryan Singer's X-Men. Now, the importance of that first X-Men movie to come out by Fox, you cannot state enough how important it was. Because if you look back during that time, especially in the superhero genre, comic book movie genre, it was crap. We had a bunch of crap that was coming out. And again, it all started with Batman and the god-awful 2 movies that came out that kind of ruined the franchise and ruined comic book movies in general. Now, we've had hints of the potentials there, like especially when Blade came out and all that, and those were one of the few that actually did well, The Crow and stuff like that. But when X-Men came out, this brought a surgence back into superhero genre movies and comic book movies. And it led the way to show studios and show directors and everybody that there is a possibility of being able to bring these characters to life on the big screen. And the cast ensemble, with the exception of a couple, Halle Berry, really worked well. And it gave us a Wolverine that we weren't expecting that we would love. Especially when we found out that they gave the role to a pretty tall Australian Broadway star. But boy, did he prove us wrong. And he played the role for years and years, I believe 17, 18 years, and he was our Wolverine. So very important movie, a turning point in the comic book movie genre. I believe it to this day, we would not have had Avengers. We would not have had Iron Man. We would not have the Marvel Universe like we have now if it wasn't for the success of those X-Men movies. Keep in mind, Kevin Feige was involved in those movies also back in those days. So he saw all this unravel, and we have what we have now. And we are now in the cusp of this dominance of comic book movies, superhero movie genres, and all that. So really great to hear. 20 years, wow, time flies. But I may do a rewatch, and I may do a dedicated video to kind of bring my thoughts back out there about how I feel about the movie and how does it hold up. I haven't seen that movie in a couple of years, so I am interested to see how it holds up. And also I want to mention that X2 is probably one of my top 10 comic book movies of all time, because man, that opening scene with Nightcrawler, fantastic stuff. So another movie that I feel is extremely underrated is The Black Cauldron. This was a Disney animated movie that came out in the 80s. Wasn't that successful, not like how their other movies were. But it turned 35 last week. And The Black Cauldron was always one of my favorite animated movies. Yes, it was dark. Yes, it was a little bit grim, especially when you compare it to all of the other Disney animated movies of the time. But it was, the world that they created was really fascinating. The characters were really, cute and all that. And it's always been a favorite of mine for a very long time. So it was crazy to realize that it turned 35. Now this for sure, I am going to be doing a video dedicated to The Black Cauldron and my love for that movie. So do stay tuned to the channel there. But yeah, if you've never heard of it, if you've never seen it, I don't know if it's available on Disney Plus. This was also one of those movies where it was kind of hard to find, especially in a physical form. So if you do have a chance to find it, do check it out. I think as an older audience, you may appreciate it even more now than if you caught it when you were a kid, because I could see how it could be very scary and very daunting for a younger generation, especially at that time when Disney was putting out, like favorites like The Jungle Book and Robin Hood and more lighthearted stuff. So very dark there, but I love the movie. And there was no music in it. It was a movie that didn't have any musical numbers in it. So I think it threw a lot of people off, and it wasn't a Disney movie that a lot of people were expecting, hence why it wasn't as popular. But I do feel like there's a huge cult following of it now. So yeah, do check it out. So 35. But today, oh, that wascally wabbit, Bugs Bunny turns 80. Look, Bugs Bunny was a huge staple of my childhood growing up. When HBO Max came out and they had the new Looney Tunes cartoons that came out there, I was so excited. When I did my HBO Max review, I got into a very interesting conversation with a YouTube viewer about the Looney Tunes cartoons and how they were not meant to be for kids, really. And it's kind of weird that I grew up with that. I don't think so. And again, I kind of gave the history there. These Looney Tunes cartoons, yes, it was created for an adult audience because they showed these movies in cinemas before major motion pictures. And a lot of it was propaganda for war and, kind of support for the U.S. in war efforts and all that stuff like that. But with the creation and surge in popularity for Saturday morning cartoons, they brought these cartoons to TV for a younger audience to enjoy. And, the cast of characters you have, Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, Elmer Fudd, just to name a few, were so appealing to kids and funny, slapstick, comedy all throughout, but with humor that can be relatable to adults. And that's how I bonded with my dad. And that's how I actually found out about Bugs Bunny and Looney Tunes, because he was a fan of these cartoons. So we would watch it together. I would laugh at it because of the characters and how silly, they acted and the situations they got themselves in. He would laugh at it, obviously, because of the more adult humor and all that stuff. And then as I watch it as an older person, I can totally see what he was talking about and what adults were laughing at during these cartoons. But Bugs Bunny was always the leader of the pack, kind of like the poster child of Looney Tunes and Warner Brothers Animation for years, especially in the 80s, in the 90s, in the 2000s. He found himself in live action movies and a lot of animated movies and different iterations, whether it was Tiny Toons or what have you, walk-ons in Animaniacs, and just you name it. Bugs Bunny at one time was as popular as Mickey Mouse in the world as far as brand recognition, character recognition. You had Mickey Mouse, Bugs Bunny, and I believe the third one was Spider-Man. So you had three icons that worldwide were known all throughout. And then you had the Warner Brothers stores that would open up across the country, and we were able to buy all our paraphernalia, shirts, statues, animation cells, what have you. And then you had Universal Studios. I believe it was Universal Studios. Oh no, not Universal Studios. Sorry, the Six Flags group that would have a contract with Warner Brothers and Looney Tunes, and they were able to then feature their characters at their amusement parks and all that. So, all throughout my childhood, Bugs Bunny was a major presence there. And 80 years, that's a long freaking time, man, for a character to be around and still be as relevant and popular today. And, with the new series that's on HBO Max, I feel like a lot of people are kind of bringing him back to the forefront, so to speak. And when it comes to like my favorite Bugs Bunny moments, I could go on, and who knows, maybe I'll create a separate video, like my top 10 favorite Bugs Bunny moments. But you have to put up there all the musical stuff that he did, whether it was like being like the Broomhilda character in the opera with Elmer Fudd, him, being the conductor at an orchestra. Those were always like classics for me. Every time he dressed up as a girl, as a woman, were just so hilarious, not really understanding the craziness behind it all. How he would always flirt with Elmer Fudd or Yosemite Sam, and it was just so ridiculously over the top. It's just so funny. And how a lot of people would be like, you know what, Bugs Bunny as a girl? I have a crush on that. Like, that's really, really, sexy. But you can't deny the back and forth he had with Daffy Duck, especially during like the rabbit season or any kind of like hunting season episode where it was him and Daffy and Elmer Fudd battling out, winning arguments by agreeing with what they're saying and making them seem like, take on the opposing side and everything. It was just so witty and so brilliantly constructed that the dialogue, the pacing, brilliant stuff. I mean, just anything that you had with Bugs Bunny and Daffy going toe to toe or head to head. It's really messed up, but every time, Bugs Bunny was controlling Daffy's world by being the artist and drawing all the different scenarios and obstacles and all that stuff and causing him all the stress and heartache, those cartoons always had me dying and cracking up. And really, really great stuff. So, yeah, so the icon Bugs Bunny himself turns 80 years old. I mean, what are your favorite Bugs Bunny moments? I'd love to hear it from you guys. Chime in the chat and let me know. And yeah, I think now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, it will be a very interesting series to put together. My personal top 10 classic Bugs Bunny moments. So, stay tuned, and then you can help chime in on that. So guys, that's pretty much my time, and that's the show. So, thank you again for watching. Really, really appreciate the support. Like I said, if you're watching on the replay, do hit that like button. It really, really helps with the algorithms. And if you're not already subscribed, do subscribe. I'm building up this community and this channel to make sure that I cover a wide range of pop culture stuff and goodness there, whether you're into movies, games, collecting, what have you. I'm looking to really, really build up this channel and community so that we could all express our passions and appreciate our passions within this culture. So until next time, guys, I'll be back again next Monday with another Low-Key Geek Live podcast. But until then, stay cool, stay classy, stay safe, be kind to one another, wear that mask, wash those hands, and I hope you make the rest of your week as memorable as possible. All right, guys, so I will catch you next time.